In 2017, Cardinal George Pell left the Vatican Secretariat for the Economy to face charges of sexual molestation allegedly occurring in his Melbourne cathedral in the 1990s. After a mistrial in 2018, a second trial unanimously convicted him, and he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Cardinal Pell was then incarcerated for 404 days until Australia's High Court unanimously acquitted and released him in April of 2020. He joins us now to share his latest work, Prison Journal, Volume 2, The State Court Rejects the Appeal. We discussed breaking news from the Vatican as well. Here's my exclusive interview with George Cardinal Pell from our bureau in Rome. Your Eminence, thank you for being here. In your new book, Prison Journal, Volume 2, you write about how someone had a dream and they contacted you with it, and they predicted that you would be free. You write in your diary, as someone who's innately skeptical but believes strongly in the reality of the supernatural, I would have been surprised if the situation panned out as predicted. I know, too, from my reading, of the slightest number of inexplicable events and coincidences, whether they be paranormal or supernatural, but that even in miraculous apparitions, e.g. Fatima, the specifics, the detailed predictions can be wrong. How did you feel the moment you learned that you had lost that appeal in August of 2019? What was the first thing that went through your mind?
How did I feel? Well, enormously disappointed. I thought it was logically inexplicable. I wasn't inclined to doubt it or think it was surreal, but it was intensely disappointing, and it was one of a series of reverses. So I must confess at that stage I didn't estimate the judicial processes very highly at all.
How did prayer sustain you through this period, Your Eminence? It had to be very difficult, considering, I mean, you knew you were innocent, and yet this steamroller kept moving forward.
Well, I received an enormous amount of prayer support. I had so many people praying for me that I wondered whether it was overkill. So I remember praying to the good God to say, well, look, there might be too many people praying for me, but you can redistribute these things. I followed a common sense daily rule of life. My prayers, exercise, sleep, watch the television, read, wrote. So the grace builds on nature, and with a bit of common sense living, that better helps you maintain your equilibrium. And I think undoubtedly all the prayers and the knowledge that I had so much support, that was a stabilizing factor too.
One of the peculiarities of your prosecution was the total media blackout imposed by the court. It forbade coverage of your case. Now, they claimed they did so to prevent news of one trial affecting the jury pool or the outcome of the other trial. You were being tried in 2 localities. What does this say about the Australian judicial system?
Well, I think it was a reasonable decision. It didn't work to my advantage because once the facts of the accusations became public, public skepticism grew enormously. But I had the threat of another trial, and they didn't want to prejudice my chances there. Now, those cases were, a good number of them were thrown out by the magistrate. The others were thrown out by the judge as not worthy of going forward. But the basic decision is explicable in terms of normal judicial practice. But it didn't work out in my favor.
In December, Pope Francis formally stripped the Vatican Secretariat of State of its financial assets and real estate holdings. Now, this went into effect in February. Was this a good move toward financial reform in your estimation?
Well, it depends, of course, how it's managed under the new regime. but the old regime was so fantastically incompetent, at least, that, and I'm not sure whether they ever had official authority to manage such amounts. I'm not sure under Vatican law they ever had the right to own property in their own name, which helps explain why they went into these funny partnerships. So no, I think it's definitely a step in the right direction, but the Holy Father said that an investment board will be set up that is manned by experts in investing. These things can be done. A man, I think his name was Svensson, just died recently. He was in charge of the patrimony at Yale University. For 20 years, he averaged 12.5% gain a year. The Vatican has lost hundreds of millions over the last 20 years, hasn't gained.
Yeah, they certainly need outside help. What does the Vatican need to do, in your estimation, to handle finances? I mean, Pope Francis recently ordered a 10% pay cut for cardinals, and he's looking to cut elsewhere, it appears.
Well, they're running a very significant deficit. It was an established sort of inbuilt deficit of 20 or 25 million when I left in 17. It's ballooned out to 50. It might be 70, 75 this year. When you've got an annual budget of 300, 350 million, you can't be losing 50 million a year. Something has got to give. And on top of that, there's the pressure on the pension fund, which will become quite significant, certainly in 10 years' time. So the situation has to be rationalized in some way.
While you were in prison, the German bishops launched their synodal way. What did you think when you heard that they were preparing to discuss for 2 years 4 main issues: the way power is exercised in the church, sexual morality, the priesthood, and the role of women?
Well, I think the German church is at a crossroads. They have to choose to be servants and defenders and teachers of the apostolic tradition. So they stand under the Word of God, under revelation, under the teaching of Jesus and the apostles, or they choose another path and say that we are the masters of that tradition and we can change the teaching. Now, I don't know whether abortion and euthanasia are on the books, but I hope not. But certainly they want to change the teaching on, some do, on sexual morality by blessing homosexual unions. They object to the tough teachings of Jesus on adultery and against remarriage. They seem to have a different list of qualities that are necessary for the fruitful reception of the sacraments, different from that of St. Paul. And some of them would want to have an order of women priests. Now, we can't have a German set of the Ten Commandments, and we can't have a set of women priests in Germany and nowhere else. So these things have to be resolved, and I think the situation should be explained as basically as I have explained it, so that people just know what is happening.
I recently asked Cardinal Mueller, who was on the program, his thoughts on what's happening in the German church. And, you know, they're defying the Vatican in so many areas. Here's what he had to say.
The Catholic Church, or the Christians, all the Christians have to follow the word of God. And this is a form of heresy, not only of schism, but also of heresy.
Your reaction, Cardinal Pell? I mean, a record number of Catholics have abandoned the church in recent years, 272,000 plus people leaving in 2019. Your thoughts on whether the Vatican should intervene at this point?
Well, the role of the papacy is to maintain church unity, and it's to maintain church unity around the teachings of Jesus. And whether they will cross the Rubicon, as they say, I'm not sure they will. I think if people go into schism, they would lose the right to church taxes. I don't know how it will be resolved. I hope the worst will be avoided. But the role of the papacy, and it's a concern for all the bishops, because we're concerned first of all with our own church, but with the universal church, the role of the papacy is to maintain unity.
Yeah. I want to get your reaction to the reports that we're reading in Italian periodicals that the Pope may undo Summorum Pontificum, Benedict XVI's motu proprio, allowing wide use of the old Roman rite of the Mass, the extraordinary rite, at the discretion of the priest. Would it be a good idea to curtail the celebration of the old rite, the extraordinary rite, or might it create more division?
I think it would be most unfortunate. It would be counterproductive. It's been an area of unexpected growth. Many people are very attached to that beautiful form of worship. I don't anticipate that there will be restrictions.
Ah, okay. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. Since you've returned to Rome, Your Eminence, you've witnessed this Vatican financial scandal that you long suspected. In May, a UK judge set bail of $1.6 million for Gianluigi Torzi, the Italian businessman who helped broker that Vatican purchase of the London investment property. And earlier this year, a British judge blasted Vatican prosecutors for making appalling misrepresentations to the court about their investigation into the Holy See's investment deal. Do you think we know the whole truth of this scandal at this point?
No, I don't think... I certainly don't. I don't think, I don't know how many people do, but I did say to one significant Vatican official, for God's sake, get good lawyers who can present the case adequately. And, you know, we want the truth, nothing more than the truth. Everybody's got a right to due process, whether it's Torzi or Cardinal Pell or the man or the woman down the corner. We're a lawful society and due process is essential.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I do want to wish you a happy birthday. You turn 80 on June 8th. Now, by turning 80, you lose your right to vote in future conclaves. Any feelings on this forced Roman curial tradition?
No, I think it's a sensible tradition. With the advance of medicine, you might make a case for it to be extended a little bit, but it's alleged that when Pope Paul VI introduced the limit, it was prompted by the fact that one of the presumably older cardinals voted for Cardinal Merry del Val, who had been dead for 30 years. So I think the responsibility for church leadership remains with the people who are the leaders, not with the people who were the leaders. So I'm basically in favour of the regulation. I always have been, and now that I'm about to turn 80, I remain of that same mind.
Well, I hope they still consult with their cardinals who can't vote, because your insight is so important and has been, certainly during the last two conclaves. Before we end, the Pope has announced a rolling synod, if you will, that will take place over several years, where there'll be a local synod, continental synod, and then the bishops will come to Rome. And it really is a synod on synods. Does this go a bit too far with synodality? I mean, is there a limit to how long and far you should keep consulting? Now we're consulting about the consultation.
Well, we'll just see where this goes. I mean, we're hope if we're in, as long as we're in a COVID world, of course, it's not at all practical. But in a post-COVID world, travel will be limited, money will be limited, and so I think that this is. I'm not even sure that there is a topic that is going to be discussed in these synods. So I think that will be rolled out very slowly, but we'll just see what comes. It's very early days on that.
Okay, we'll watch together. Your Eminence, thank you for being with us. Prison Journal Volume 2 by George Cardinal Pell, published by Ignatius Press, is available now at bookstores everywhere and online at ytsync-en.com. Cardinal Pell, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Raymond. Thank you.
Prison Journal Volume 2, The State Court Rejects the Appeal by George Cardinal Pell, published by Ignatius Press, is available now in bookstores everywhere and online at ytsync-en.com.